The world did not begin in silence. It began in struggle. Before Rome ruled the seas, before its legions shook the earth, it was only a village of mud huts beside the Tiber River, surrounded by enemies, starved by floods, and cursed by geography that promised survival only to the ruthless. And Rome chose ruthlessness. A shepherd king once said, "A city is not built with stone alone, but with discipline." Rome took that lesson and carved it into history. By the 3rd century BCE, Roman legions marched in perfect formation, iron discipline wrapped in red cloaks. Unlike their enemies, Roman soldiers were not warriors fighting for glory. They were citizens fighting for the state. Every shield locked, every step measured. When one man fell, another replaced him. Rome did not panic. Rome adapted. Against Hannibal, history's greatest general, Rome lost tens of thousands at Cannae. Blood soaked the fields. Any other empire would have collapsed. Rome did not surrender. Instead, senators debated through the night by torchlight. Taxes were raised. New legions were formed. Generals were replaced. Rome learned from defeat and turned survival into strategy. Power was not only won on battlefields. In marble halls, political intrigue decided the fate of continents. Senators whispered alliances. Emperors rose and fell by daggers, poison, and betrayal. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon not with an army, but with ambition. Augustus followed with something more dangerous: stability. Roads stretched like arteries across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Law replaced chaos. Latin replaced tribal tongues. Rome did not merely conquer, it absorbed. Enemies became citizens. Gods became shared. Trade flowed, culture merged, and rebellion slowly faded into order. For centuries, Rome stood because it evolved. When kings failed, Rome became a republic. When the republic drowned in corruption, Rome became an empire. When emperors grew weak, Rome split itself in two, east and west, to survive. But history leaves warnings. As borders expanded, loyalty thinned. Generals commanded armies more faithful to them than to Rome. Gold replaced virtue. Power replaced purpose. And while Rome still looked eternal, cracks spread beneath the marble. The legions still marched. The Senate still spoke. The empire still stood. But the question remained, could Rome defeat the enemy it had never learned to conquer? Time itself. The answer would change the world. The world did not tremble when Rome was born. It laughed. A cluster of huts clung to the banks of the Tiber River, flood-prone, exposed, surrounded by stronger neighbors who mocked the idea that this muddy settlement could ever matter. Etruscan kings ruled the hills. Greek cities glittered to the south. Tribal warriors prowled the forest to the north. Rome was nothing, and that was its greatest advantage, because Rome learned early that survival was war. In the 7th century BCE, iron rang against iron as young Roman men trained not for glory, but for endurance. They drilled until pain became instinct. Discipline replaced fear. When enemies charged in chaos, Rome answered in formation. Shield to shield, shield. Man to man. No hero stood alone. Only the state mattered. At the heart of the city, power shifted dangerously. Kings fell to rebellion, and from their blood rose something radical. The Roman Republic. 2 consuls ruled instead of 1 king. A senate of aristocrats debated law and war beneath flickering torchlight. It was messy, corrupt, brilliant. Rome had discovered a weapon sharper than swords: politics. But enemies were closing in. From the south came Carthage, a maritime titan whose ships ruled the Mediterranean. From the north, Gaulish sharpened blades and crossed the Alps. Rome stood surrounded, outnumbered, and inexperienced. Senators argued. Generals doubted. Farmers were pulled from their fields and handed shields. Then came the first great test. In 390 BCE, Gallic warriors stormed into Rome like a living fire. The city burned. Temples collapsed. The Senate prepared for extinction. Some said Rome was finished, that the gods had abandoned it. But Rome did not beg. It rebuilt. Stone by stone, wall by wall, the city hardened. Legions were reorganized. Defeat became doctrine. Rome would never again rely on luck. It would rely on preparation. Every road would serve an army. Every citizen would be a soldier when needed. Rome was transforming from a city into a machine. Generations later, that machine met its deadliest enemy. Hannibal Barca. In 218 BCE, he led an army, elephants and all, across frozen alpine peaks no one believed passable. Roman scouts reported the impossible. Senators laughed until villages fell silent. Then legions vanished. At the Battle of Cannae, Roman blood flooded the field. Nearly 70,000 men died in a single day. Mothers wailed in the streets. The Senate chamber echoed with fear. Allies defected. Rome's enemies waited for surrender. One man rose in the shadows of defeat, Quintus Fabius Maximus. He spoke not of glory, but patience. Avoid battle. Starve the enemy. Let time become Rome's ally. Many mocked him. Rome demanded vengeance, not delay. And as Hannibal camped on Italian soil, his army undefeated, his confidence unbroken, the Roman Republic stood divided between pride and survival. The legions were shattered. The people were desperate. The enemy was at the gates, and Rome had one decision left to make. Fight as it always had or change. Rome chose to change, slowly, painfully, and against its own pride. In the Senate House, marble floors echoed with angry voices. "E delay is cowardice," one senator spat. "The delay is survival," replied Fabius Maximus, his voice calm, almost tired. "Hannibal wins battles. Rome must win the war." Outside the city, Hannibal's army moved like a storm. Villages burned in the night. Fields were trampled under foreign boots. Roman citizens watched from the hills as smoke rose from their own land. Every instinct screamed for confrontation. Yet Fabius refused battle, shadowing Hannibal from a distance, cutting supply lines, poisoning wells, forcing the invader to chase ghosts. The people hated him for it. They called him Cunctator, the delayer, so Rome abandoned patience. 2 new consuls were elected, men of fire and ambition. They marched out with banners snapping in the wind, confident that Rome's numbers alone would crush the invader. Near Cannae, under a sun that seemed to thirst for blood, Rome deployed the largest army it had ever assembled. Hannibal smiled. Hannibal smiled. His troops bent inward, drawing the Romans forward. The legions pressed deeper and deeper until the trap closed. Cavalry struck from behind. Steel screamed. Men suffocated standing upright, crushed by their own knights. By sunset, the Roman eagle lay in the dust. A survivor staggered back to the city gates and collapsed. "Connie is lost," he whispered. Rome froze. Black cloth draped the streets. Senators shaved their beards in mourning. Mothers searched the list of the dead, praying not to find familiar names. Hannibal waited. Certain Rome would finally surrender. It did not. Instead, the Senate met in silence and made a decision history would remember. No ransom. No negotiations. Every able-bodied man would serve. Slaves were armed. Criminals were forgiven in exchange for loyalty. Even boys trained with wooden swords beneath the watchful eyes of veterans would bleed. But it would not kneel. In the shadows, political intrigue sharpened. Ambitious generals maneuvered for command. Wealthy families funded legions in exchange for influence. The Republic's ideals strained under desperation. Power began to shift from the Senate to the men who controlled armies. Meanwhile, across the sea, Rome struck back. A young commander named Publius Cornelius Scipio studied Hannibal's tactics by firelight. To defeat him, Scipio murmured, "We must become him." He led Roman legions into Spain, cutting Carthage off from reinforcements. Town by town, Rome learned how to fight with speed, deception, and psychological terror. Hannibal, undefeated but isolated, waited in Italy, watching allies abandon him, supplies thin time slipping away. Rome was no longer running. It was hunting, as Scipio prepared a final audacious move to carry the war directly into Africa. The Senate hesitated. If he failed, Rome would have nothing left. Across the sea, Hannibal received the order he never wanted to hear: return home. 2 masters of war were moving toward each other. One final battlefield remained, and the fate of Rome, balanced on the edge of annihilation or eternal dominance, was about to be decided. The plains of Zama lay silent beneath the African sun. Dust hung in the air as 2 men faced the weight of history, Hannibal Barca and Publius Cornelius Scipio. No cheers followed them. No banners waved. This was not a battle for land or gold. It was a verdict on the future of the world. Hannibal spoke first, his voice calm, edged with exhaustion. "We were born to be enemies, Scipio. Let this end with honor." Scipio studied the man who had haunted Rome for 16 years. "Honor is for poets," he replied softly. "I fight for survival." When the horn sounded, the earth shook. Hannibal unleashed his war elephants, thundering forward like living siege engines. Roman ranks parted, not in panic, but with precision. Trumpets screamed. The beasts turned, crashing back into Carthaginian lines. Discipline defeated terror. Infantry collided in a storm of iron screens. Veterans from Italy met Rome's reformed legions, trained to mirror their enemies' movements. The battlefield became a grinding wheel of flesh and steel. Then came the moment Scipio had waited for. Roman cavalry returned. They struck from the rear, just as Hannibal had done at Cannae years before. The Carthaginian line shattered. Hannibal stood motionless as the truth closed in. For the first time in his life, he had been outmatched. By dusk, Zama was over. Carthage sued for peace. Its fleet was burned. Its armies disbanded. Tribute flowed to Rome like a river of submission. Hannibal fled into exile, a living legend defeated not by fate, but by a city that refused to surrender. Rome had won more than a war. It had discovered its destiny. In the years that followed, Rome expanded without mercy. Greece fell. Macedonia bowed. Asia Minor opened its gates. With each conquest, Rome absorbed the world, its gods, its scholars, its wealth. Roads stretched across continents. Law followed the legions. Order replaced chaos. But victory carried a price. Wealth flooded the republic, and with it corruption. Small farmers lost their land. Generals returned from war as heroes and realized their armies loved them more than the Senate. Power shifted. Ideals bent. The republic began to crack beneath its own success. Julius Caesar would later cross the Rubicon with legions loyal not to Rome, but to him. Augustus would crown the illusion of a restored republic while ruling as emperor. Marble temples hid iron control. Peace came, but freedom faded. Yet Rome endured. When barbarians pressed the borders, Rome adapted. When civil wars tore it apart, Rome reformed. When the empire grew too vast, it split in two, sacrificing unity for survival. The Western Empire would fall, but the Eastern, Rome reborn as Byzantium, would stand for another 1,000 years. Rome did not dominate because it was perfect. It dominated because it learned from defeat, from enemies, from its own mistakes. And as the legions faded into history, Rome left something stronger than armies: law, language, governance, and the blueprint of civilization itself. Empires rose, empires fell, but Rome never truly died. It became the world that followed. And the question remains, if Rome could survive collapse, betrayal, and time itself, what truly does it mean for an empire to fall?